Would you believe a buyer got his $150,000 deposit back even after signing an unconditional commercial deal? So here is the court case that every buyer's, seller or investor should know about. A buyer agreed to purchase a commercial property in Ontario for about $2.71 million. They put down $150,000 deposit. The property was income producing and the buyer's financing depend heavily on the rental income. There was a tenant who ran a dance studio there, but after signing the deal, the tenant decided it wasn't going to honor the lease and found other location. And here is where things get very interesting. The tenant represented approximately 30% of property income, and the buyer had only one condition in the agreement, the commercial inspection, and the buyer waived that condition, making the deal firm and binding. But the seller already knew that the tenant was leaving. The buyer was not given this full picture before waiving the condition of inspection. Then the buyer could not obtain financing because the rental income had changed. The seller said, "Too bad, you have signed the deal, we keep your $150,000. So both went to the court. The judge saw it differently. The seller argued, caveat emptor, buyer beware. If you've been following me on my social media, there's plenty of videos I put behind which talk about buyer's obligation to close the deal or caveat emptor, buyer beware. So watch those videos. And the judge agreed the buyer could have protected himself or herself better. For example, the buyer could have had financing condition in the agreement, a warranty that leases remain in good standing, or could have asked for tenant estoppel certificate. So tenant estoppel certificate, for all those people who don't know that, is a signed statement given by the tenant that the lease is active and real, and where tenants confirm to the new purchaser exact rental amount, lease end date, when the landlord owes any favors or there's a secret agreement between them and the landlord. And once signed, the tenant cannot change his story before the closing. And obviously he could have included a clause protecting against major changes in the rental agreement. So, but buyer beware does not mean the seller can knowingly allow the buyer to operate in the agreement until under a false impression. That was the court judgment. The court found that the seller's silence about this major change breached the duty of honest performance. So the verdict, the buyer won and $150,000 deposit was returned to the buyer. The judge found that the seller knowingly withheld this material change affecting the property income until after the buyer waived its only condition in the agreement. So the bottom line, so the question you have to ask is, if you were the buyer, would you have included a financing condition buying commercial property? And if you are buying an income property, don't just ask, what does the lease says? Ask, has anything changed since we signed the deal? Follow me for more real estate court cases explained in simple English. This content is purely for education purposes and not a legal advice. My name is Singh, broker owner with Fortune to Reality in Ontario. Thanks for watching.